What's up, man?
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
New conversation.
Man, we have been rolling, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I haven't been able to see you catch up except for just phone calls and stuff because you're in one city.
Well, we did the dating conversation.
Yeah.
And we sat down, and truth be told,
Yep.
Let's be honest. Like, we sat down, and we did that in two parts.
Yep.
And we just changed our clothes in between to pretend like we were coming in on different days.
You're not supposed to tell all the secrets,
because,
man.
because it was two different conversations. And then we hadn't seen each other in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, man. And that's just, the nature of the beast. But it's been incredible, bro. Like, it has been.
I got my Lift Tour t-shirt on right now.
Yeah. I love that, man. Great advertisement. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And,
yes, sir.
But, man, it's been cool. All right, so most memorable moment so far on the tour,
Yeah. Well, we've, for some reason, and I'm not just saying this, like there's been these moments in the invitations this year that have been a little different where there just really has been an outpouring of the Holy Spirit in a way that you almost could, like, it's just thick in the room.
Yeah.
But there have been also some moments. Like I was leading into the invitation in Pensacola this past weekend, and this young lady, bless her heart, she was trying so hard. You could tell this girl's grown up in church, got her Bible. But she got a coughing fit. Like she just started coughing, and she'd been coughing the whole sermon.
Oh, bless
But I was about to go into the invitation. She knew it, so she took her hoodie and she wraps it around her face to try to muffle her cough. And her head's turning red. She looks like her head's gonna pop off.
Oh my gosh!
So I walk over to her and I'm like, we can go get a sip of water.
Right,
it's
right,
okay.
right,
It's
right.
a cough drop. Where's the youth worker in the room? Youth
Right,
worker.
right.
Let's get a sip of water and a cough drop.
Yeah, yeah.
And just so we could have the invitation, but
So you were doing ministry before the invitation.
Yeah,
That's so great.
yeah.
See, I would have thought, bro, like you had your kids in Orlando.
I did.
And,
that's right.
That's
it's hard to remember.
Yeah.
This weekend. Yeah.
Like that for me. Whenever I've had my kids in a
You're right.
conference and stuff, man, it's just something sweet and special, man. And your kids, man, I love them. They're my nieces and nephews.
Yep.
And so, but just the fact to see them praising Jesus and worshiping and being there, man. So I would have thought, because you had the cool picture, like you had.
I had all four. I had all four. I had 6 kids. I had my 4 teenagers at Lift Tour Orlando. Yeah.
So the big $1 million question is, what does Miss Chris do with the babies? Because I know they're probably the two. They're like, wait a minute, why is everybody else leaving? When is it gonna be our turn?
The 2 babies. The 8 and 10-year-old had a mommy weekend.
Yeah.
Like, she spoiled them, man.
Oh,
like, they
that's
went
so
and
good.
played and baked.
That's dope,
and
man.
Watched movies. And,
Yeah. Okay, so they weren't really sad then.
No, they were happy. They were
They
like,
were
when are y'all
happy.
leaving again? Yeah.
That's
What about
awesome.
you, man? Memorable? I mean, we've been in so many different
golly,
cities.
man. I will tell you, Brent, there has been, we were in Murfreesboro.
Mm-hmm.
And we just saw heaven come down, and it's really, really cool. You got 1,600 students in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But leading up to the final session, we had the revolving door. They do middle and high school back to back. So middle and high school for first and second, third, and then we had them all together.
Yeah.
And man, just to see 1,600 in the room, we had like this worship night and just singing and just crying out to Jesus. And this was kind of like, that final commissioning to, hey, listen, now you go live, countercultural and stuff. And then you just saw this swelling. We had an amazing, time of invitation where students responded to the gospel that first night. But then, man, you got a room of 1,600 students in the balcony and on the floor coming down to the altar, just really kind of stepping up to the challenge or answering the challenge or responding to the challenge, of like, man, I'm going to live counterculturally. And so I had them all come down, and we just kind of prayed over them as they just kind of made this declaration together. And it was just such a beautiful picture, and it was a very eclectic group. Like you had students from all walks of life, denominations, socioeconomics, ethnicities, and it just looked like a picture of heaven.
Yeah.
And so it was just really, really beautiful to see.
Well, this theme, Jeff, this inverse theme, I've told every room I've been in, like, forget all the other rooms, guys. If just this room took this theme seriously.
Man, what?
I mean, it's pretty
crazy.
powerful.
Yeah. So now, bro, like, we're in this thing, and we look up, and because we're in the thick of Lift Tour and preparing for Youth Pastor Summit coming up and all that stuff. But now we were like, yo, we're also in a very important season of
You know,
the Christian
I want to
walk
just go ahead and
and
take a
faith.
time out and say that because of DJ L. Val,
Yes.
the L. Val,
The number
and if
one.
you don't follow him on social, please don't.
Yeah.
Because it'll be nothing but taco memes.
Yes,
and
yes. He
silliness
loves
all day
Jesus.
long.
Trust
I
me.
laugh probably more than I should at the stuff he posts. But, you know, he's converted us all to become, you know, part-time Catholics.
Yes, he has.
And
Yes.
so we're gonna talk about Lent, the season
Oh,
of
man,
Lent.
that is so funny. That's a great transition.
Is that a good transition?
Oh, I love that,
Right.
and actually kind of true. You know.
Yeah.
It's-
Well, so we're gonna talk about Lent. Now,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
let's start with this. Lent, though, you know, Lent can trace its historic roots in the Catholic Church.
Absolutely.
But to be fair, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, there was only the Catholic Church.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
so you had this idea that we're going to have a time leading up to Easter traditionally, and you have to use the word traditionally.
Right.
Lent is the 40 days minus Sundays
Yeah.
leading up to Easter.
Yeah.
And so from Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday, and you're supposed to, in the olden times, they would fast, have just one meal a day.
Yep.
They would eat on Sundays.
Yeah.
That's why you did 40 days minus the Sundays.
Right.
And then you would have this big celebration on Easter Sunday, including a huge feast and all that. And there was a series of councils early on in church history. Now, councils, just the Wikipedia version of this, Jeff, and
Yeah.
I'm saying this for everybody listening,
Yeah.
obviously, because Jeff could teach on this for hours, is a council would be a group of church leaders.
Yeah.
Certain times they were called bishops, at other times they were called different things, but church leaders who would get together to debate
Yeah.
and to decide
Yeah. Yeah.
on different theological issues.
Correct.
And so the Council of, I think it was the Council of Nicaea, is where we have, okay, Lent is going to be a part of the annual rhythm of the church where
Absolutely.
we fast for the 40 days
Yes. Yes.
leading up to.
Mhm.
Now that's, what was that? That was in, I've got it written down on my notes. That was Nicaea, that was 325.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we don't have the Reformation until the 1500s.
Right.
So for, 11 to 1200 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. You're right.
I mean, this is
that's true.
This is the tradition of the church.
Yes.
So
Yeah. So when you think about it from that context, great background, Brent, in context of understanding why we say, hey, the traditional model of how Lent was practiced. This is the genesis of it and where it starts and stuff. And so, but in present day now, as the Christian faith, those who are part of the Christian faith, they
Right.
are using this season, which started actually on Valentine's Day this year.
That's
And
right.
so it's going from the 14th.
Easter's so early. This
It
year.
is. Yeah. Because
It's weird that Easter's in March.
I know, right. Yeah, because I was thinking about, I was like, yo, Lent this year ends on the 28th of March. And so it's like, you're still in March. I always think of Easter as April,
Yeah.
springtime, April, and all of that. And, but it is the custom, the tradition of Christians, to really observe and remember the events leading
Yep.
up to and included the death of Jesus. And so we think about the teachings of Jesus. We know this is not a aha duh, thank you, Captain Obvious moment, but just for context, that the teachings and the life of Jesus, they're the foundations of the Christian faith. And so the reason why this is so significant is because when we think about Resurrection Sunday and we think about Easter and the significance of it, it is the center point of our faith. You
Right.
know, what do we always talk about when we're sharing with our students is that, man, and I love, so this is something that you always say that I've embezzled, and so
Embezzled. That's a fun word.
yeah,
Okay.
but how you always talk about, and we share with students that the Bible is an autobiography of the life of Jesus, and always talk about how the overarching theme is redemption, and the Redeemer Jesus is the central character and the hero, and so when we think about Lent and the reason why it's so significant and why we really kind of celebrate and observe Lent is because it leads us up to the foundations of our faith and the significance of our faith.
Yeah. And so what happened is, so if you, from a historical perspective, you got post Protestant Reformation, there would be Protestant movements, and then a little bit more modern era denominations.
Yes.
Who would go, you know what? That's a good idea. So we're going to adopt that into our rhythm.
Yes.
And so there were quite a few different streams of Protestantism, that version of evangelicalism who went, yes, we will observe Lent. Fast forward to 2024.
Yeah.
And it really has become this thing that is widely, some people just ignore it, and that's okay.
Right, sure.
Right? Sure. It's like Advent. If you don't celebrate Advent in a very intentional way, are you really celebrating Christmas? I'm not going to go that far.
Right.
It's not reserved, the season of Lent, to just certain denominations anymore. There's a lot of different people who observe Lent. I interviewed Pastor Darren Whitehead, Church of the City, in Franklin, Tennessee, and they observe Lent in their church, and Lent is traditionally fasting. Yeah, it's a time of fasting and repentance and prayer, and they typically have the last few years had a digital fast in their church. Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that this season of Lent is being observed. So what I want us to do is, but I want to mention the word Lent. I love the fact that it comes from, I'm looking at my notes. I'm just going to, full confession here. It comes from an Anglo-Saxon Middle English word, Lenten, which means spring, which kind of is the idea of lengthening. Yeah. And I love that mindset, the mindset of going, okay, I'm going to lengthen this season because that's how important the resurrection is. Yeah. And so there should be a mindset attached to Lent, whether you observe a 40-day period or not. And that's what we want to talk about.
Absolutely.
And is how do you have a Lent mindset? And then we're going to apply that mindset in 3 ways. And this is kind of modern day.
Yes, sir.
2024. Charity, caring, or almsgiving is one way. Right. Prayer is another way. Yep. And another discipline that is focused on during Lent is fasting. Right. Again, you can focus on other areas. Yeah. Again, like Pastor Darren, his church focuses on fasting from digital technology and things like that. But there's a, it's not so much what you fast on, it's the why you fast, and how the fast focuses your life.
Yeah, and that word focus is the essential purpose of the fasting or practicing the different disciplines that are centered around Lent. It is, putting us in a place where we can prioritize and focus and get ourselves closer to God.
Yeah. So. All right, so let's talk about a Lent mindset, and then we'll talk about that as it relates to, I want to outline a Lent mindset, and then let's talk about it as it relates to charity or almsgiving or giving to the poor or caring. And what happens is these 3 disciplines that kind of have been a modern day focus all appear in the Sermon on the Mount.
Absolutely.
All appear back to back.
Yep.
All appear in Matthew chapter 6.
Yep.
But the Lent mindset, you and I have made some observations about this Lent mindset. The first thing I noticed is that from all the way back in the 300s, Lent was all about redeeming the time. Yeah. It was all about being very intentional with a particular season. Yeah. And of course, that season being 46 days when it's all said and done, but 40 days of fasting and prayer. So there is a mindset of, if I'm going to value the resurrection and celebrate it properly, I need to redeem the time leading up to that resurrection.
Yeah, and it's about the self, self-renewal, self-reflection, and then self-discipline, right? We think about putting ourselves in the mindset of, if we're going to redeem the time, how are we going to be intentional about redeeming the time? How do we say, okay, during this time, I want to have some moments where I'm prioritizing moments away. We live in a land of plenty, and so I'm pushing away from the busyness of life, and we'll deal with the 3 pillars more in depth later. But how am I just kind of being intentional about pushing away and having some time of self-reflection? What are those things in my life that I need to renew? Because also, when I go back to self-reflection, it's also about a time of taking a personal assessment as we are desiring to have a very intimate, deep relationship with our Heavenly Father. We spend this time really just saying, hey, I'm going to kind of do some self-reflection, self-evaluation. Where are some ways that I need to be better with my time so I can redeem the time properly? And then what are some disciplines that I lack, and
so what are those 3 things again, Jeff?
the disciplines.
No, self.
Oh, self-reflection, self-renewal, and self-discipline.
And maybe that's what we say. That's how
Yeah.
we redeem the time.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
redeem the time through self-reflection, through self-discipline, and through self-renewal.
Yeah.
That's like, if you do those three things, you're valuing the moments well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also kind of centers ourselves around this idea of understanding what this season is. And I think, for me personally, you talked about, Pastor Darren there in Franklin's church and how they are fasting, and we're fasting, talking about abstaining from, like digital fast. The whole purpose of that is from that idea of how am I going to, one, be more disciplined to say, hey, you know what? We live in a very digital driven age, and it is very natural within our culture and society to pick up our phones, to be on the computer or whatever it is, because that's the culture we live in. And so it causes me to practice certain disciplines to say what is natural to my flesh in this moment. I'm going to discipline myself to kind of say I'm going to abstain from that for a season so I can recenter or refocus or prioritize myself to God. And so that's really what that mindset, you talk about that mindset. I love the idea of just redeeming the time, because that's what it is about, the mindset during the season.
And so we redeem the time to anticipate the event.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times I think anticipation is a lot of times under-discussed or under-valued in when we're talking about worship and when we're talking about spiritual disciplines. We don't cease from something, fasting.
Yeah.
Just for pomp and circumstance and to be self-righteous and all that.
Yeah.
No. We're anticipating something.
Yeah.
And so there is this idea that I'm redeeming the time so that I can anticipate. I'm redeeming the time so that I can, it's that I'm creating margin for this emotion, to this groundswell of anticipation for the most momentous, for the most eventful thing that would ever happen in human history, which is the resurrection.
Yeah.
So anticipation
That's good.
is a key ingredient in Lent, and it's a key ingredient in worship, because it kind of prepares our minds and our hearts to be able to celebrate well.
Yeah, I love that. The anticipation as a leader, not as a leader, but just as a believer, that we are anticipating, being in that moment where we can, celebrate the resurrection. One of my favorite songs, man, I love now is Phil Wickham's, Friday is good, but Sunday is coming.
Yeah.
And just the way, you listen to that, it's talking about that anticipation.
Phenomenal storytelling.
The
storytelling in that song is what creates the anticipation.
Yes, exactly. That we anticipate this reality that, man, Sundays are coming. And so during this season of Lent, that's what it's about. We are spending times getting our mind right, redeeming the time in anticipation of what's to come.
Yeah. And of course, whatever you're fasting from, whatever you're focusing on, is going to create a sense of deeper devotion. So a Lent mindset also has that idea of to become more fully devoted.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's okay to pick a different discipline every year.
Yeah.
I think Lent should be all about Jesus, but should also meet you where you are in your journey.
Absolutely.
To go, hey, how do I need to be more fully devoted to Jesus?
Yeah.
The last thing I would say about a Lent mindset, because I want us to be able to talk about that Matthew text, is that you got to have a specific emphasis. In other words, it's not ambiguous.
Yeah.
It's specific.
Yep.
It's and of course, in modern day, like we said, almsgiving or charity or caring, giving to the poor, prayer, and fasting are the three kind of modern day emphases.
Yeah.
And we're not restricted to those, but you do need to pick an emphasis.
Yeah. And I would add to that one word, that it needs to be sacrificial, meaning that it needs to be something that is going to cost you something, right? We think about, what are we anticipating? Back to your last point, we're anticipating, this moment of Sunday when we know the resurrection is coming, but we also know the brutalness of of crucifixion,
Right.
you know. And so in this time, as we're abstaining, pushing away, practicing self-renewal, self-control, self-reflection, and self-renewal, self-discipline, that we're also, there needs to be some level of sacrifice, you know, in a very funny but, you know, simplistic way. You know, it's like, hey, for me, there, you know, somebody introduced me to some cinnamon flavored veggie chips, you know. And
that sounds like a contradiction if there ever
and
was
very
one.
much so. You know, dear friend of ours, Drew Worship, actually. You know Drew.
Yeah,
Drew
that sounds like a Drew Worship thing. Wow.
Drew's like, man, he's like, these cinnamon veggie chips, man, they're awesome, whatever.
I bet they are.
Yeah, okay. I would much rather probably just watch paint dry or eat dirt. And I tried them. It was horrible. But now if you were say to me, hey, Jeff, you know, you can't go to, say, you know, we love the Polite Pig or something, you know, someplace that's a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice for me to abstain from veggie chips, cinnamon flavored veggie chips.
Yeah.
but I'm being funny but serious. I think it's important that we
Like if
understand.
you don't like taking out the trash, it's not a sacrifice to go, well, I'm just not going to take out the trash.
Right. And so the point is, it needs to be, when we talk about it needs to be a felt need, a felt discipline, something that it is sacrificial during this moment. You set, to your point, the priority, and it can evolve, and you know there is no right or wrong way to do it or thing to abstain from. It just needs to be something that is going to cost you something. It needs to be sacrificial and that.
Well, let's talk about, if we were to take these three, because there's so much that can fit under these three categories.
Yeah.
Charity, almsgiving, giving to the poor. You know, those are so generic terms, but it is. I like the word caring.
Yeah.
You know, caring for the underprivileged, caring for the under-resourced, caring for those in need. But if there's an emphasis in caring, there's an emphasis in prayer, there's an emphasis in fasting. Let's talk about an emphasis in caring for a moment. And obviously, this modern tradition was born out of the fact that all three of these disciplines, all three of these practices are all kind of linked together in one text in Matthew chapter 6. But in the first 4 verses it says, be careful not to practice your righteousness. This is Jesus teaching, Sermon on the Mount. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them.
Yep.
Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father in heaven. Whenever you give to the poor, don't sound the trumpet before you, as hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be applauded by people. Truly, I tell you, they have their reward. But when you give to the poor, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. That was a proverb. That was kind of probably a proverbial statement that they would have been familiar with. That basically meant don't show off what you're doing. Right. Don't let other people know what you're doing. Kind of keep it secret, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. You know, I've mentioned it before, Jeff, but he's really talking about the motivation that drives your giving.
That's it right there.
And there's an old there's an old book, Victor Hugo's book, that would end up becoming the play Les Mis. And in that book, he defines motivation for us. And there's a character called Cosette, and she calls motivation invisible labor. Can't see it, can't measure it, doesn't fit on a scale. But there's something that drives us. There's an inner why. There's an inner cause. And that's what Jesus is getting at here. And he's saying, hey, your inner cause has to be right if you're going to really care for the poor. Yeah,
and he's saying, hey, and you care for the poor not because it's something you want to be seen doing. And he says, no, your motivation should be that within the heart. Paul actually kind of reiterates that a little bit in 2 Corinthians 9 and 7. He says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give. You know, he says, not reluctantly, you know, but he says, for God loves a cheerful giver. That idea of Paul saying, a cheerful giver, that one who out of the abundance of the heart, or out of what's in your heart, that is the motivation for why you give. And here is Jesus is speaking here in verses 1 through 4 in Matthew 6, man. That's what he's basically saying. He's like, hey, listen, you know, if you're doing it, if your motivation is to be seen and to be recognized, and for somebody to say, oh, look, Jeff gave so and so all of this or whatever, and you have to add a boy, then Jesus said, now you're sinning. Like, that is sinful and prideful.
It's pretty strong terminology.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
going, hey, this is not, you don't have any reward in heaven.
Yeah.
But maybe another way, if we were to take Jesus' words at
Yeah,
face value,
yeah, right,
Jeff,
right. God forbid we do that.
If the applause of others is your purpose,
Mm.
then heaven probably isn't your home.
Woo-wee. Yes, sir.
And-
Now that's
and
good. Yeah.
He's getting to the core of our very essence and being. He's going,
Yeah.
hey, you're a pretender. He calls them hypocrites, and you're a pretender who makes a lot of noise, sounding
Yeah.
trumpets, and you're a pretender who makes a lot of noise in all the right places to receive the most attention and self-promote in the synagogues and on the streets,
Yeah.
in the holy places and the common places. In
Yeah.
other words,
Yeah. I love that.
You self-promotion.
Right,
Like, this is 2,000 years ago.
right.
What are people struggling with more than anything right now?
Hey, being
just
trendy,
saying. I'm just
you know,
saying.
being an influencer, you know, and so, but here's what I love. In verse 1, he starts off by giving a caution.
Yeah.
He says, be careful. He says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of people to be seen by them. So he just starts off by the caution of like, hey, you know, check your motives at the door.
Yeah.
Check your heart at the door. You know, if you're doing this, if you're doing this to be seen again, then your motivation isn't pure. It's not authentic, and you're not really giving the way he's
Right.
talking about it in the context of this text. And so to bring it to our whole Lent discussion, that's what we have to kind of center ourselves on is, you know, as we are, you know, caring for others, as we are giving, you know, of ourselves, our time, our talents, or whatever, you know, what's the $1 million question that we should be reflecting on and pondering during this season? What's the motivation?
Right.
You know, let's be honest with ourselves, you know,
Right.
and Lord, help me to have the right heart and the right motivation as I'm caring for others.
And if again, there's no reward for you in heaven. He's saying.
He
It's
said
like
he
if you-
does. He's
I mean, there's no. So
Yeah.
if your motivation isn't right, he calls you a hypocrite, which is another word for people who would act in plays and like you're just an actor.
You're an
a
actor.
pretender.
You're a pretender. Yeah.
Like you're just pretending that
Yeah.
you care. You don't really care.
Yeah.
You only care about self.
Yeah.
You only care about self-promotion.
Yeah.
Synagogues in the street.
Yes.
You're a pretender making a lot of noise
Yeah.
to get a lot of attention.
Yeah. And who were pretenders during that time? Pharisees. You know, they were keepers of the law, but
Yep.
in many ways, as Jesus talked to them, hey, you're being a pretender, you know, and I think that's really, really a very strong and
Yeah.
powerful statement to understand as we again talking about centering ourselves around this moment where we can focus on the gospel.
Yeah, if you practice righteousness for the purposes of building a reputation, you've missed it.
Yeah.
You know, he's going, no, give,
Yeah.
care, but be humble
Humble,
in how
yeah.
you give. Don't let your right hand know what your left is
Yeah.
doing. Like, hey, like this, it shouldn't be something that's, look over here.
Right,
No,
right.
it almost should be look the other way and
Yeah.
in secret. And it's
Mhm.
the person who can observe Lent well, the person who has the 4 characteristics of a Lent mindset that we've already outlined, is going to execute whatever their focus is.
Yeah.
Remember, you got to have that specific emphasis. If it's caring for others, then they get to the end of the Lent season, and no one but God will probably know that they cared.
Yeah.
Or expressed their caring and caring for others because they loved in such a way that there was no temptation for self-glory and self-praise.
Yeah, is the motivation to please the audience of many or to please the audience of one?
Yeah.
And I think that's the bottom line right there.
Yeah.
So
Well, Lent's. I didn't grow. Did you grow up celebrating Lent? I didn't.
I didn't initially until I started at my church with my senior pastor. Now was my youth pastor. Well, when I was in Atlanta, but in our first church, no, we didn't.
Yeah.
And it didn't. We didn't have like these intentional practices until I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And so
I always thought it a Catholic thing until my adult life.
Yeah.
And it has become. I mean, I don't observe it in the strictest of ways
Yeah.
where I go, we start on this day, we end
Yeah.
on this day. No, we just kind of move into a season where we go, we really have this emphasis of redeeming the time, of preparing ourselves and anticipating, of being very specific, of, we really have this mindset. And then for me, it's changed every year where there's a different emphasis
Same.
every year. But I think at some point, your emphasis will be caring for others,
Yeah.
caring for those in need.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, you just think about this for a moment, Jeff, from a practical standpoint. If the church at large, for just 40 days out of the year,
Yeah.
cared for for those in need,
Mm.
how much need would there really be?
Oh man, you mean when the church starts being the church? Yeah, there's a novel idea, man.
A Lent mindset could change everything.
It can.
A Lent mindset could change everything. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this conversation's been somewhat helpful. If you've never considered Lent, you can do so without becoming a Catholic. I promise you. It's possible. It's possible.
Yes.
And so I
Brian
hope
confirmed that.
Brian told us it was okay. He gave us permission to be Protestants and still observe Lent. And so I hope that you'll consider having a Lent mindset this season as we prepare for arguably the greatest day of all year on the Christian calendar.
Yes.
Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, when we celebrate the fact that he is risen indeed, and because he is risen, he has conquered death and hell and the grave, and you and I can live forevermore in his presence. To God be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Hope this has been a good conversation for you. Follow us at SLU Lead, and we can't wait to see you next time. Until then, wander well and shine like stars.
Take care, guys.